And it is Lockout Thursday as MLB announced that they will be going into a lockout. Rosters are frozen. It is a sad day in baseball, but a lot to get into on this episode of Locked On Braves as we enter the locked out. So we'll get into that and a lot more on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
Hey, this is Stacey Gotsoulias,
DC Lundberg,
Ryan Finkelstein,
Taylor Blake Ward,
host of Locked On Yankees,
Locked On Mariners,
Locked On Mets,
Locked On Angels,
and you're listening to Locked On Braves.
Locked On Braves,
Locked On Braves,
part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, where we talk about your favorite teams every day. I am your host, Jake Mastriani, and you can follow me on Twitter at ShortstopBall. Check out my bio there to see everywhere I am covering the great game of baseball, including the Atlanta Braves over at TomahawkTake.com. Also, make sure you follow the podcast on Twitter at LockedOn_Braves. Follow us on YouTube as well at Locked On Braves. And make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast, wherever you get your podcast. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Braves your first listen each and every day. We post episodes daily, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, and we are free and available on all platforms. And make sure that you send in your questions. It's going to be pretty dry for content here over the next couple of weeks, maybe even months. So make sure you send in your questions on Twitter as well. You can tag me at ShortstopBall as well as the podcast at LockedOn_Braves. But send in any questions you would like to hear answered on the podcast, and I'll make sure I'll do that. Probably not just on Fridays going forward. We'll probably be doing that a lot more throughout the offseason while this lockout is going on. But please make sure that you do submit your questions for the podcast there. And it is a very sad day in baseball. For the first time in 26 years, we have a work stoppage as we are currently in a lockout. So if I look tired, I look a little depressed. That's probably why I was up late watching, or not watching, but just looking for all the updates on the lockout, reading the notes from Rob Manfred and Tony Clark, and just really a sad day in the sport that we've gotten to this point where the owners felt the need to lock out the players, but that's where we are. It's been an ugly negotiation, something we've seen coming for a long time, but hopefully it won't last very long. So we're going to talk about that today, the lockout, what it means, how long will it last, what are the implications on transactions. We'll talk about the Braves not getting a Freddie Freeman deal done, which is really why I stayed up as late as I did, because I did not want to give up on that deal happening, but it looks like it is not going to happen before the lockout, which is highly disappointing. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll also look at the list of free agents that went unsigned before the lockout, because we had a flurry of moves before this lockout came, but there are still a ton of really good free agents out there once this lockout is over. Well, let's start with the lockout. Both sides have been meeting in Dallas, Texas this week, getting together for, I say negotiations because there wasn't much negotiating going on, it sounds like. But the two sides met for 3.5 hours on Wednesday before essentially calling it quits, yesterday or Wednesday afternoon. So again, really no movement all week with the owner. The owners didn't even make an economic proposal this week, sticking with the one that they made last week. The players made their final proposal on Tuesday. Apparently, the owners were very frustrated and disgusted with that proposal. Some of the things in those proposals that I wanted to mention, MLB was willing to increase the minimum salary and the luxury tax thresholds. I think it's pretty huge. I talked about it already. I think the minimum salary for players needs to be increased. I think that's one that you could easily do, increase it to $1 million or whatever it may be. I think that's a very easy solution. So it sounds like maybe the owners were willing to do that, and also to increase the luxury tax threshold, which really only applies to a handful of teams, maybe 4 or 5 teams, but they were willing to increase that from 210 to 214 million, and then all the way up to 220 million throughout the years of the hopefully soon to come collective bargaining agreement that will be agreed upon. And then Major League Baseball also proposed to modify the draft system, creating an NBA style lottery type for the first 3 picks of the draft. I can kind of get on board with this. I actually not a huge fan of the NBA draft lottery, and I don't really think it does much for teams tanking in general. And then it just really sometimes can hurt teams that are just actually bad and trying to win. As somebody who's a casual Atlanta Hawks fan, it was really frustrating to see them, trying to play hard, watching them try to win games, but just not having the talent to do so. And then getting the 8th pick in the lottery. It doesn't seem fair in that regard. So I'm not fully on board with the lottery, but, making it where it's only the top 3 picks, and then you kind of go in order of record. That seems a little bit more fair, but, at least they're getting talks about trying to improve the draft and trying to keep teams from just absolutely tanking in order to get the top pick in the draft. The players countered that. They wanted deeper changes for the draft that honestly I've read a couple of times and I can't really explain, but it's all to try to keep teams from tanking and trying to keep teams to be more competitive throughout the entire season. The players offered to expand the postseason, but in a different format than what MLB had proposed. I think what MLB had proposed was you had, I want to say, 9 teams from each side make it, and then you had the top teams get a bye, and then they get to choose who they wanted to play in the wild card round. It was something crazy like that. Basically 14 teams, or I'm sorry, it was 7 in each league, so 14 teams overall. The top seed got a bye, and then the top 2 division teams got to pick who they wanted to play in the wild card game. They play a 3-game series, and then you move on to the division round, and and then it's regular format at that, which sounds a little bit crazy to me. I'm not always for expanded postseason, but it would drive up revenue for sure and be a money maker. The players also proposed having patches on their uniforms, which would bring in obviously a ton of advertisement revenue as well. So those 2 things to try to increase revenue, expanded postseason, wearing patches on uniforms. The biggest issue, though, that MLB is pushing back on, and really what I think the crux of this whole thing are players getting a free agency sooner, are getting to arbitration sooner, revenue sharing, and service time. That's what really what the players are fighting for right now. Look, I'm not trying to put all the blame on any one party here. The players want more money. They feel like the owners have more money to give, and they want more of that money. That's essentially, what this is all about. But they don't like the arbitration system and the fact that you can pay all-star level Cy Young. I mean, Corbin Burch just won the Cy Young, and he's going to make, $4 million next year. I mean, the players want to see younger players get paid, more what they're worth, or get paid sooner, get to free agency sooner so that they can get paid. So that's really what, the players are fighting for here. The players proposed allowing players to hit free agency at a certain age. So they would automatically become free agents. So, say you are 29 and a half, and then you have 5 years of service time, then you automatically become a free agent. Which I actually like that proposal. I talked about before on the podcast. I don't really want to see the arbitration system turned upside down, because I like the fact that you can know that homegrown prospect that you've raised, you've trained, is going to be under your control for a while. I think it'd be hard as a fan if, you drafted these players, you scouted them, watched them through the minor leagues come up, and then 2 years in, they're an all-star level player, and suddenly they're making $15 million a year. And you can't afford that. And then you have to trade them to a large market team. I don't want to see that. I think that would be terrible for the game. But having them hit free agency sooner, using it by an age, I think I could get on board with that. Having them automatically become a free agent by 28, 29 if they have so much service time in the big leagues. That'll, of course, lead to some teams trying to manipulate that service time. And when players come up and, when they're ready for their window to compete, maybe they hold a prospect back until they're ready to compete a little bit. So they make sure they get a full 6 years of time from them. There's always going to be some sort of manipulation in that regard. And players wanted players to become arbitration eligible after 2 years instead of what it is as 3 years, except for Super 2 players. They only have to go, they only get the minimum for 2 years and then become arbitration eligible for 4 years. But they essentially want that across the board where players become arbitration eligible after just 2 years, which again, I'm okay with that. It would make superstar type players, all-star type players start to earn big money a lot sooner than they currently do. So, I can get on board with that. Really, really all the things that were proposed there, I think make a lot of sense, which is even more frustrating why a deal is not done, because I really have no problem with any of those except for maybe the expanded playoffs and the draft, lottery type idea. But the rest of it, as far as money is concerned, I think those are solid proposals. But the players have their heels dug into the ground. They are not backing off. And didn't think I was going to talk about this quite as much. So I want to take a break, and I want to come back and give you Rob Manfred's comments and kind of dig into this a little bit more. Before we do that, let me tell you about BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered all season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football season continues the march to the playoffs. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the sports action this season. Head to their new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code Locked On to receive your bonus from basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. So like I said, we're entering the first work stoppage in 26 years since the 1994 season, where we went into a lockout, missed the World Series and everything. It's sad for the sport of baseball. So I wanted to read what Rob Manfred, the letter that Rob Manfred posted when the lockout occurred, because very kind of telling. And, obviously this is a one-sided statement, but it's more so just telling of where the two sides are and really just how far apart they are at each other. So I'm going to skip down a little bit through here. And this is from Rob Manfred. He says, I'm so disappointed about the situation in which our game finds itself today. Despite the league's best efforts to make a deal with the Players Association, we were unable to extend our 26-year-long history of labor peace and come to an agreement. Therefore, we are forced to commence a lockout to major league players. I want to explain how we got here and why we have to take this action. Simply put, we believe that an offseason lockout is the best mechanism to protect the 2022 season, which is a good thing. I certainly agree with that. And then he says, I hope we lock out with jumpstart negotiations and get us to an agreement that will allow the season to start on time. This defensive lockout was necessary because the Players Association's vision for Major League Baseball would threaten the ability of most teams to be competitive. It's simply not a viable option. From the beginning, the MLBPA has been unwilling to move from their starting position, compromise, or collaborate on solutions. So there's a lot more to it there. You can go read that letter, but I mainly want to get that part in right there where, Manfred's basically accusing the players of just not giving an inch, and that the league, the owners have, tried to make compromises and the players just haven't budged at all. And again, that's a one-sided statement. I get that, but I think some of it is truth. It seems like the players came into this mad, upset, and they just weren't going to give in at all. And that's why we find the situation that we are in now with the lockout. There's got to be more compromise. I think the players, they're mad that they got beat in the last negotiations. They're mad about what happened in the 2020 season. And how the Rob Manfred and the owners kind of held that hostage. And look, I don't like Rob Manfred any more than the rest of you. I think he is a joke of a commissioner. I think he is a puppet for the owners. He has no backbone whatsoever. I'm still mad that he took the All-Star game away from the Atlanta Braves. I don't know that I'll ever really get over that. I do not like Rob Manfred in the slightest, but I do believe what he's saying here in some regard. In fact, that the players are just not budging. They are mad. They have somewhat of a right to be mad, but there just seems to be no compromise really on either side. I think the owners are trying to give small increments to the players, not trying to completely retool the system. And it sounds like the players just want to rip it up and just completely, start over with the system, which isn't going to happen. You have to take some of those small increments and realize you're not going to get everything done in this negotiation, but you take a small step towards getting to where you want, each negotiation. So there's got to be some sort of give and take here on both sides. It sounds like that's not the case. These two both came into it with bad intentions, bad attitudes, and now it's really just pride and ego that has gotten into the way, and neither side wants to compromise with the other. Neither side wants to give in to the other side. And so they're really both kind of just acting like pouty children at this point, not getting their way and then just pouting about it. That's really what it seems like from a fan's perspective. I get it from the players. They want to fight for, to get the best that they can. But again, they're making a lot of money. It's hard for a fan to sit here, and so are the owners, but it's hard for a fan to sit here and think about you're getting to play a game for millions of dollars. Yes, you have to give up a lot. There's some sacrifices that come with that. But as a fan, we just want to watch the sport we love and how we're seeing it torn apart over millions of dollars that most of us will never make. So it's hard from a fan's perspective to just sit back and see that unfold and see the game that we love be put on hold over basically pride and ego at this point is what it is. So it's very frustrating. As far as how long it will last, most don't believe that this will, cause games to be lost during the season. I just don't think either side can let that happen. Part of me thinks that the owners know that the owners know they can't lose games. And so that kind of holds leverage over the players. But at the same time, the players know that they can't lose games either, or else Major League Baseball is going to crumble as it did after the 94 lockout. So both sides need each other. They need the game to start. They need the game to play, to be played. I mean, they had a lot of momentum as far as, fan attendance, fan viewership, merchandise. I mean, the game was at a really good place. And this has the ability to really just crush all of that. And so, neither side can really let that happen. So for that reason, I am hopeful. I believe this lockout will not last into, February. I don't think it will mess up spring training, pitchers and catchers. I expect the deal to get done by the end of January. It might be the last dates of January. And I should probably not make predictions because I'm really bad at making predictions, but I do believe a deal will get done before the end of January. If it goes into February, I would start being really concerned at that point. But again, the two sides feel very far off right now. It feels like neither are really giving an inch. And so that is scary. Both sides have obviously left Dallas. They're gone back to their home. So who knows when they'll continue negotiations. Obviously we have the power of Zoom or technology or whatever, so they can continue to have talks, conversations. You don't have to be in person, but I just wonder how aggressive they're going to be. Hopefully we'll get more news on the situation and what's going on, but I do not expect this to affect the season. If a deal's not done by the end of January, then I'll start being concerned. At the moment, I'm not really that concerned. This part of the offseason is typically pretty slow, except for the winter meetings, which are now canceled, typically the first or second week in December. And then after that, it's usually pretty slow till about the end of January anyway. So I don't think that really affects the offseason too much. And we've already had a flurry of moves before the lockout. So, we've really already seen most of what we would typically see in an offseason already. And then, I think they'll be shut down, for the next month or two. And then we'll see things. I think we'll see the lockout end and we'll see player transactions pick back up. And, just to note, player transactions are frozen. There are no signings. There are no trades. Owner or teams can't talk to players. Players can't talk to the teams and vice versa. So that is completely frozen at this moment. All right, next I want to talk about the players that are still available, as well as Freddie Freeman. Before we do that, let me tell you about Bet Online. Or I'm sorry, let me tell you about all right, so let's take a look at the free agents that are still available, and one of them being Freddie Freeman. So to me, this is just very sad situation. The fact that nothing has gotten done yet. It's really, to me, a slap in the face to your star player, your franchise player, that you could not get a deal done before this lockout. Really, that you couldn't get a deal done during the season, before the season, last offseason. Again, I've said it over and over again. This is something that should have already been taken care of. And from all reports, it sounds like a sixth year is the hang up here. The Braves are probably somewhere at like 5/140, and Freddie wants 6/180. I would give him the 6/180 if it's me, but I'm a fan. I'm not a GM, but it's really frustrating that they weren't able to get this deal done. It just seems so obvious a fit. I mean, this isn't just some random player, that's played a couple of years for you and helped you win some games. This is a guy who went through a rebuild to win you a World Series. He's the face of your franchise, loves the city of Atlanta, wants to be here. All the fans want him to be here. Pay this man. Like, I don't get it. It is beyond frustrating at this point. This is Freddie Freeman we're talking about. Give the man what he deserves. Give the man the deal that he wants. Keep him in Atlanta for the rest of his potentially Hall of Fame career. So it's just beyond frustrating at this point. I've talked about it several times. I can't believe we are even to this place. And the fact that we have to hear rumors about the Braves checking in on Matt Olson and Carlos Correa, like, either of those would actually ever happen, but it's just kind of smoke from the Braves to say, hey, we have other options out there. Like, give me a break. Go get Freddie Freeman. I mean, that is your guy. I don't know why the front office is choosing to treat him like some schmuck off the street. This is your guy. He makes you millions of dollars. He puts fans in the seat. Like, go do it. Get the deal done. I'm so over it at this point. And the fact that we are now going to have to sit here for another possibly 2 months in a lockout and still not have a deal done with Freddie Freeman is just beyond maddening. I don't understand it. I don't get it. Just sign him. You should have signed him already. At this point, I'm almost more on Freddie Freeman's side of saying, hey, if the Yankees throw $200 million at you, go get it. Because why would you want to go back to a team who is treating you like this after you've been everything to them, won a World Series for them? I just don't understand it. And I'm sick of it. I'm over it. And now we have 2 more months of just not knowing and just speculation. It's just, I'm really, really frustrated with the whole process and why we are to this point. I just don't understand it. I still believe it'll get done, but the fact that we've had to drag this thing basically through the mud the whole time is just, I feel bad for Freddie Freeman, honestly, that he's had to be treated like this. A player of his stature, an MVP winner, a World Series winner that has given so much to the city, so much to this franchise. If anybody deserves the benefit of the doubt to get a deal like this, it's Freddie Freeman, and the Braves just won't give it to him. Won't pony up the money to give it to him, the money that he deserves, that he has earned. So just beyond frustrating. This whole podcast is just frustrating and sad because we have a lockout. We still don't have Freddie Freeman, but the Braves are the 2021 World Series champions. You can always finish with that and leave on a good note. And that will do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Again, be sure to send me in any questions you have that you want answered on the podcast at LockedOn_Braves or to me at ShortstopBall on Twitter as well. And make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast, wherever you get your podcast. And we will talk to you next time.